I woke up this morning at my usual early hour, around 5 a.m. Made coffee with my new barista machine. And so there I was with my coffee, working on a new podcast episode and reading through the latest health studies that had come across my desk. A pretty typical morning for me. Then it was 7 o'clock, time for exercise. But here's the question. I wasn't really hungry yet. For me, coffee tends to reduce my appetite, at least for a while. So, should I eat breakfast before exercising? Or is coffee enough? And even if I weren't exercising, should I eat breakfast anyways? We've all heard the saying, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. But is it? Where did that idea come from? Was it science or tradition or marketing? Does the evidence actually support it? Gail and I have a line we use all the time. Inquiring minds want to know. And inquiring minds really do want to know this one because breakfast could affect weight loss, cognition, school performance, or exercise. Does breakfast deserve the hallowed title of most important meal of the day? Let's find out. Hi, I'm Dr. Bobby Du Bois, and welcome to Live Long and Well, a podcast about what the evidence can and can't tell us about living healthier lives. As a physician, scientist, Ironman triathlete, and author of several hundred scientific papers, I read the studies so you don't have to, helping you cut through the hype, focus on what actually works, and make better choices for your health. Welcome, my dear listeners, to today's episode. Breakfast, the most important meal or the most marketed? We've all heard the advice. Eat your breakfast. Breakfast starts your metabolism. Breakfast helps you lose weight. Breakfast helps kids learn. Breakfast fuels your day. But is that true? Here's a problem. We can't really answer, is breakfast the most important meal, until we answer best meal for what? And the moment you list the for whats, you see why no single meal can likely win everything. Does breakfast uniquely help you lose weight, have energy to exercise, stay sharp at 10 a.m., get enough protein, connect with people you love? A meal could be great for one and completely irrelevant to another. My hope for today, as always, is to give you criteria, and then, of course, you decide which meal might be the most important. And spoiler alert, it might not be breakfast. So my first step here wasn't to find evidence. It was to build a scorecard with 3 questions. 1, does eating breakfast change my body and my health? My weight, blood sugar, disease risk, protein, muscle. Second question, does it help me perform today? Energy for exercise, mental focus, and sharpness. Question 3, does breakfast help me live well? Connections and family rhythm. But often things are more complicated, so there are other considerations. For whom? Your answers may differ. A well-fed adult or a hungry kid, an endurance athlete, an older adult chasing protein. Same meal, different verdict. And compared to what? Is breakfast the most important meal of the day compared to a tiny breakfast? skipping breakfast, a bigger lunch, just coffee. So it is more complicated, but I hope by the end I will walk through those 3 questions, give you answers from my standpoint, and then hopefully help you decide. But before we dive into the history of this saying, many of you signed up already for Dr. Bobby's one-page prescriptions. These are these one-page PDFs that give you kind of the action items from each episode and the next steps that you might take. Let me know what you think of those. If you haven't signed up or haven't signed up for my newsletter, just go to the show notes and there'll be a link there, or just go to my website, drbobbyevidence.com. Okay, the history. Breakfast is the most important meal. Guess what? It didn't come from a medical breakthrough. It began a couple hundred years ago, 150 years ago anyways, by Dr. John Harvey Kellogg. If that name sounds familiar, Kellogg, stay tuned. So he built a sanitarium, part spa, part hospital, part hotel in Battle Creek, Michigan. He was really, in some respects, the first longevity guru. His gospel was biologic living. A lot of vegetarianism, no alcohol or coffee, lots of exercise. Now, cereal was an accident. In the 1890s, they had some wheat dish, side dish, that was made for the folks at the sanitarium for dinner. And they left this wheat out overnight. And they came back the next day, and it was flaky and crispy. It became, obviously, the first ready-to-eat flaked cereal. And he served it to the folks there. Now, he didn't add sugar. He didn't add salt. It was a little bland, but that was the origin. Now, his brother, John's brother, W.K. Kellogg, said, there's a business here. So he added sugar and salt. Of course, the doctor wasn't happy about all that, and he launched the Kellogg's Company in 1906. An ex-patient at the sanitarium, C.W. Post, copied the same idea into what became grape nuts. Now, the phrase itself came from that sanitarium by dietitian Lena Cooper. Now, she was mentored by Kellogg, and she wrote an article in their magazine, Good Health. And the title was The Meal That Starts the Day. And it goes, yet, in many ways, breakfast is the most important meal of the day because it's the meal that gets the day started. It should not be eaten hurriedly, and all the family, so far as possible, should partake of it together. Now, it's a pretty reasonable health idea, which obviously became a business. Okay, so breakfast, interesting, but it hasn't yet become the most important meal of the day. Then in the 1920s, Edward Bernays, who became the father of public relations. He worked for Beechnut. Now, in the day, bacon was the key product for Beechnut. Now, of course, they're primarily in the baby food business. Turns out that gentleman was Sigmund Freud's nephew. And he used psychology, obviously this stuff from his uncle, to influence minds. And he was basically employed to make bacon a part of the breakfast. So how did he do this? Well, at the time, breakfast was pretty light. Yeah, maybe coffee, a roll. And so what Bernays did is he went to the company doctor. They actually had a company doctor, and said, well, what do you think about having a more full breakfast? And the doctor said, oh, that's a great idea. So Bernays said, okay, I want you to reach out to 5,000 other doctors, see what they think. And it turns out 4,500 of them agreed that a full breakfast, breakfast being the most important meal of the day, was the way to go. And as they say, the rest is history. Now, 70% of bacon is eaten at breakfast, and it's the classic bacon and egg American breakfast. But marketed doesn't mean it's wrong. So let's return to our 3 criteria. Does breakfast influence our body, our mind, and relationships? So let's dig in. Question 1, does it change my body and health? Well, if we think about that, there's a couple of sub-points I'd want to walk through. First argument, the disease risk claim. In many, many studies, people who skipped breakfast did worse. So a U.S. study of about 6,000 people followed those people for 20 years or so. And they found that those who never consumed breakfast had an 87% increase risk for cardiovascular mortality compared with daily breakfast consumers. And this was after adjusting for their diet quality, their lifestyle, their BMI, and cardiovascular risk factors. So this would suggest skipping breakfast is bad and dangerous and will cause you to die. And within the data, there's a suggestion of a dose response, which we like to see in observational studies, meaning the more you skipped breakfast, the worse things were. But what complicates this study, which is what keeps me enjoying doing what I'm doing, is that this study has a healthy user bias. Breakfast eaters are not identical in other ways to non-breakfast eaters. So when you look at breakfast causing mortality, not having breakfast causes mortality, you got to be careful, because people who eat breakfast tend to sleep better, smoke less, drink less, and keep pretty steady schedules. Contrast, people who skip breakfast often are rushed, stressed. They may do shift work, so breakfast doesn't really fit in, or they're skipping breakfast because they're already overweight and dieting. People who do healthy things often do many healthy things. So skipping breakfast may have other not so healthy behaviors associated with it. And another example is people who skip breakfast may eat way too much late at night at dinner. Unfortunately, there are no randomized control trials looking at mortality in this way. Okay, so a little bit of a murky story there. Second argument, common wisdom: eat breakfast to lose weight. Now, let's think about this. If breakfast adds calories by its very definition, and you don't cut them later in the day, why would we expect eating breakfast would lead to weight loss? Well, there was an article that summarized the breakfast weight loss randomized trials. The result, again, not surprisingly, adding breakfast didn't help weight loss. Turned out breakfast eaters actually took in, not surprisingly, more total daily calories. And people who skipped breakfast ended up being slightly lighter, less weight. Now, let's think about it from reverse. Ask people to skip breakfast. And in a summary of 7 randomized controlled trials, they showed that skipping breakfast led to about 1 pound of weight loss over about 2 months. And this sort of gave rise to the focus on intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating. And by all means, listen to my episode on weight loss that will give you background on whether that is a good approach or not. Okay, so the third way to think about whether breakfast is right for you from a physical body standpoint is the blood sugar claim, or chrononutrition. Okay, so this is the belief, this is the theory that when you eat matters not just how much you eat. So in the morning, our cortisol levels are measurably higher. Our insulin secretion and sensitivity to the insulin are higher early in the day. And as the theory, hypothesis, mechanism goes, eating at that time of day, because your various hormone levels are ramped up, you can use the food more productively. And it turns out, to make it even more complicated, is that we're not all the same in terms of chrononutrition or chronotype. There are night owls who like to stay up late and sleep later. There are morning larks like me who like to get up early and go to sleep early. So we're all different. Therefore, our biology is going to be different. Our cortisol and insulin secretion is going to be different at different times of day. This whole area of chronotype and whether one is more healthy than another and how you might work with your type is so fun that I'm going to have a completely separate episode on this topic. Okay, so the main point here is that the body handles food differently by time of day. Now, it's possible that eating earlier may be metabolically friendlier than late night eating. All right, what about the evidence? There was a 2018 study of men with pre-diabetes. And in the study, they ate all their food before 3 p.m. What did they find? Early eating improved insulin sensitivity and blood pressure, even when they didn't really lose weight. So timing itself seemed to matter. And those studies showed that front-loading calories led to 3 pounds more weight loss. But here's the problem. The evidence certainty on those studies was low. So that's a problem. You may have studies, they may even be randomized controlled trials, but every study may have high quality, low quality, this problem, that problem. So there was a lot of uncertainty. In a really well-designed study that was admittedly small, only 30 people who were obese, they randomized them to front-loading calories, meaning breakfast, or back-loading calories, meaning eating more later in the day. And the differences were profound. Some people had 40%, 45% of their daily calories in the morning for breakfast versus a group that only had 20%. So a big difference between whether you're going to eat a lot for breakfast, very little for breakfast, and see what happens. Well, what did they find out? Well, there was no difference in energy use. But the people who had larger calories for breakfast did seem to have a lower appetite. So theoretically, your body at 8 a.m. isn't metabolically identical to your body at 10 p.m. But the studies, as they often do, leave me uncertain. Now, maybe the real metabolic problem isn't skipping breakfast. It isn't skipping breakfast per se. It's saving up those calories for late at night. So it may not be just when you have those calories as breakfast, but if you're eating too late at night, a separate body of evidence says that's not so good. Okay, the fourth piece of does it affect your body is the protein claim. Now, breakfast is a place to spread the load of protein that you need. Let's say you need 90 grams of protein a day. Let me tell you, it's a lot harder to get those 90 grams of protein if you skip breakfast, because then you got to jam it into lunch or dinner and a snack in the middle, and you may not get enough protein. So keep that in mind. All right, so question number one, verdict. Breakfast may not change your body directly. may not change it directly. Any effect of eating breakfast or not eating breakfast likely runs through whether it helps you eat better across the whole day. So eating or not eating breakfast is shaky as a weight loss tool, but changing your body is just one of the three buckets or questions. How about getting through the day? Remember, question 2, does breakfast help me perform? All right, let's first look at breakfast or energy and exercise. Should you eat before exercise? In a study that looked at 46 studies underneath it, what they found was eating before exercise improved aerobic performance. So eating improved performance. So it would sound like, okay, I'm about to exercise, need to have a good breakfast. But here's the problem. Here's the interesting part. That relationship of better performance with prior eating only mattered for long aerobic performance, not short sessions. So if your workout is 20, 40, maybe 60 minutes, coffee and water are fine. But if you're going to have a long workout, maybe 2 hours, maybe 3 hours, fueling matters. It matters before you have your exercise and then during it. All right, will coffee get you there? Well, coffee does improve exercise performance. And if you listen to my coffee episode, you can hear about the evidence supporting that. But it's complicated because food, we know, may help performance if it's, again, a multi-hour workout. Coffee or caffeine may improve performance. And then you've got the combination of I had coffee with my breakfast. So it is a little complicated like most things. All right, another aspect of our mind and performance. How about cognitive sharpness? So a study from 10 years ago that summarized 36 studies on breakfast, classroom behavior, and academic performance. So this is really important because you hear breakfast is critical for kiddos and school and doing well in school. So what did they find? Mostly a positive relationship on kind of task-oriented classroom behavior. And the clearest academic gains of having breakfast was in undernourished children. As they say, it's hard to focus on fractions when you're waiting for lunch. So maybe there's a benefit for kids, so keep that in mind. But what about adults? There have been studies on whether breakfast or eating impacts your mental clarity and focus. There's probably a small impact on memory, but not on your attention to something or executive function, which is decision making. So the main point here is for a well-fed adult, and probably most of us fit into that category, the cognitive effect of breakfast is modest and mixed. Now, for a hungry child, it's a different question. So for performance, our question 2, is breakfast the most important meal? Well, it depends on the job. If you just want alertness, coffee handles it fine. But only food helps you fueling if you're doing a big, long workout. Does breakfast win based upon mental and physical performance? Well, depends which meal precedes the thing you actually need to do well. If you're working out in the afternoon or want to concentrate carefully in the afternoon, breakfast is likely not to make a difference there. Question number 3, does breakfast help me live well? As you know, my podcast is Dr. Bobby, Live Long and Well. We want to live long, of course, but we also want to live well. And meals can be social. Do listen to my episode on social connections and why that's so important for longevity. Food, thinking about it broadly, or meals, isn't just about fuel. Meals give us a rhythm to our day. It's cultural. Some cultures eat large lunches. Some cultures eat late at night before bed. Our culture tends to eat a fair bit of breakfast. Meals are also part of connecting and decompressing at the end of the day. And this is where dinner usually is the winner. In an interesting study that used Gallup poll data from not just 1 or 10 or 100 countries, but 142 different countries. And they studied this issue of sharing a meal, whether you ate alone or you shared a meal with others. The result, how often people shared meals predicted their well-being, their happiness, and not surprisingly, loneliness. And it was as powerful, having these meals together, as the impact of income does on health and wellness and well-being. So this is not proven cause and effect. And as it turns out, 1 in 4 Americans now report eating their meals alone. So here I'm not really giving you data about breakfast per se, but the importance of eating with others as a part of your consideration. So if you're having a meal and it's dinner with your family or friends, it generally will focus on how was your day, reflecting backwards. But if you're sharing a meal at breakfast, you're likely to focus on what's ahead and are you ready for the day. Okay, so now let's tally the scoreboard. Yes, indeed, let's do that. The battle of the meals. So I set out 3 scorecard criteria. The impact of breakfast on your body, on your mind or performance, and on social connections. 3 meals and potentially 3 different winners, breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Okay, let me make this tangible. Breakfast wins as the most important meal of the day if your goal is making sure you get early protein in the day. You want to have a circadian-friendly timing for your food. Or if you're fueling a hard morning workout, or kids and learning readiness, or a family launch pad in the day, breakfast wins for you. Let me point out, I said for you because those might be your goals. Dinner wins if your goal is connection and a satisfying end-of-day ritual. There is no single most important meal for everyone. The best meal of the day is the one that helps you have the day that you want and reach that happiness, wellness goals you have in mind. It's important for me to point out, be more cautious about skipping breakfast if you are, again, a child, even an adolescent, if you're pregnant or diabetic. And of course, talk to your doctor. Okay, so we've been together here for a half hour or so. My answer. So after all of this, here's where I personally land. And notice, I'm not handing you a rule. I'm handing you my scorecard. You can apply it to your life. And your answers inevitably will be different, and it should. So for me, and just for me, breakfast is not the most important meal of the day. Now, that's not the same as I always skip breakfast. My real answer is, depends upon what the day is asking of me. If I have a significant workout ahead, a long ride, long run, a couple hours or so, I will eat breakfast. And that's to perform, perform today. And that's important. So, as I said, if it's a long workout, I definitely want to fuel. And for that, coffee is not enough. Now, in about 30 minutes, I have my trainer, Nina, coming for my strength training workout. And it turns out I haven't had my breakfast yet. Well, it's not more than an hour workout, so maybe I'll have a banana or something just to get my system going. Not evidence-based, just what I tend to do. But if I'm just working, reading studies, writing, building an episode of my podcast like this one, my coffee is enough. The only problem I need to solve is alertness, and coffee solves it for me. Food, if I were to have breakfast as well, would just be calories I don't necessarily need. Now, if I have an opportunity of eating with friends or family my breakfast, then of course breakfast jumps to high priority. That's the live well bucket, and connection wins. On those mornings, eggs are beside the point. It's the table and those I care about sitting around it. And if nothing is pushing me towards breakfast, no big workout, no people at my table, then I usually skip it and save those calories until I'm actually hungry. So, is breakfast the most important meal of the day? Not for everyone. Not most days for me. So ask these questions. Does breakfast change your body, help you perform, or help you live well? If it solves a problem that matters to you, eat breakfast. If skipping breakfast leaves you feeling fine, skipping may be reasonable. And if your breakfast is really just coffee, it might be fine. Enjoy it, but know that it's not protein or fuel. Now, maybe breakfast isn't the most important meal of the day. Maybe it's mostly the marketing over the last couple hundred years. The most important meal is the one that helps you live the day you're actually trying to live. As always, this isn't about the perfect rule. It's about the pattern that helps you live long and well. What do you think? For you, is breakfast the most important meal of the day? Let me know. Thanks so much for listening to Live Long and Well with Dr. Bobby. If you like this episode, please provide a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen. If you want to continue this journey or want to receive my newsletter on practical and scientific ways to improve your health and longevity, please visit me at drbobbylivellongandwell.com. That's doctor as in DR, Bobby, livelongandwell.com.